Hi everyone. The Very Hungry Caterpillar represents to me the learning journey that I want my students to take in their school library. Just like the little caterpillar who munched his way through a slice of Swiss cheese, a piece of cherry pie and a pickle, I encourage my students to experiment and experience information in all its different formats while they're at Riccarton High School. Remember back to your time at primary school? On library day, we'd line up in twos and walk, often hand in hand, across to the library where you'd wait very quietly for your school librarian to come out. And then you'd be allowed inside where you got the opportunity to pick one or maybe two very special books. Then you'd go up to the desk and you'd take the cards out and they'd be stamped and you'd put them in your book bag and you'd take them home. And then throughout our years at primary school, we're introduced to all these different amazing titles and people who connect them with us. And many of these books, they stay with us for life. And then suddenly, overnight, around the onset of those teenage years, it seems like many of these once really adoring library customers suddenly disconnect with us and our services. Technology's appeal seems to take over and they start breaking away from the choices that have been made for them and they start to make their own. And for many of them, the school library and libraries in general don't feature on these new radars. We're perceived as being irrelevant and out of touch. Now, around these years, something else starts happening. Well, quite a few things start happening, but watch any group of teenagers in virtually any situation, and there's one thing they all, just about all have in common. They nearly all have a mobile phone. Now, I'm employed at Riccarton High School primarily to support NAG 1, National Curriculum Guideline 1, to support the teaching and learning programs of the national curriculum. In 2010, I was introduced to Core Education's 10 Trends ideas. Now, these are themes that have been identified as trends that will impact on the work of teachers and practitioners working in early childhood centres, schools and tertiary centres in the coming year. In 2010, the number 2 trend was internet-capable mobile technologies for learning. Around the same time, I read a stunningly riveting Ministry of Education statement that said the national curriculum states that schools should explore not only how ICT can supplement traditional ways of teaching, but also show how it can open up new and different ways of teaching. Got me thinking. And then I was sitting in a school ICT Committee meeting where it was announced we had a little bit of spare money and that a project needed to be created to spend this that would enhance education. I presented a verbal proposal on the spot for an iPhone for the library. The benefits I proposed would be one-to-one interactions with students who may possibly not engage with the library's resources in the traditional way. There'd be fewer distractions if we were having that one-to-one relationship. I could demonstrate the potential of these perceived pesky devices to teachers, and I could demonstrate that in the library to teachers. And the potential for greater engagement was my big draw card. I read Ewan McIntosh, who's a digital media expert, say that engagement has a profound consequence on behaviour, cooperation, socialisation, confidence and self-image. That really, really stuck with me. I think in another life he must have worked with teenagers in a school library because engagement is a really difficult thing to get with teenagers in libraries. The proposal worked, strangely enough. I didn't think it would. I hadn't expected it to fly without a written proposal being submitted as well. So the money was given to me to buy an iPhone for the library. In hindsight, I haven't admitted this in school, an iPod probably would have done the job, but it was rather nice having the iPhone. We introduced it really casually. I had a phone in my pocket, like the students had in theirs. We'd walked around, we did our normal library stuff, but when I needed a catalogue, which was often in the classroom where we didn't have one, out came the phone. I could pick an opportunity for a student who was not engaging in the lesson and take him or her, largely him, away, and we could sit at a table in one-to-one. We could explore the library catalogue with them having the phone, the library website, and doing the playing as they were learning. It was really, really powerful. I have got a Latham in my head, who was the class clown, and Latham and I sitting at a table, exploring his research, finding him books, placing a hold on them, and then suggesting, maybe we could look on Delicious and we could save some websites for you. Him getting a Delicious account. That kid is still an amazing library user, but he'd been written off by his teacher. It was an absolute revelation to me how engaged kids in general could be when we took that play and transferred it into their learning. And a lot of that is what I've learned in my work with CORE. I transferred that from a mobile device into a classroom setting. I do a lot of teaching, and usually it had been me doing the talking, the kids doing the listening, and then they could play. Well, I cut out that step and said, if you want to play while we're talking, go for it. And the classroom management became virtually nil. Kids were engaged, they knew what they wanted to find out, and they're used to multitasking because they are digitally savvy. They're born with it just about in their hands. October 2010, I went to my first ULearn, the Innovation and Education Conference, again run by CORE. It absolutely blew my mind. There were nearly 1,000 people in the convention centre in Christchurch, mainly teachers working in education who were passionate about the role technology can have to engage and enhance learning. I came back with an idea for a new service for Riccarton High School's library. Is there an app for that? Teachers and students were used to us providing books for them and print-based resources. They were used to me doing team teaching with them about using Google efficiently, and often me bashing Google around the head and saying how it doesn't work. We were used to database searching, and kids were used to asking, Miss, is there a database that can help me with this? But is there an app for that was going to be the icing on the cake. And then the earthquake hit, and 2011 didn't start the way we had thought it was going to. We came back from 2 weeks with school being closed to a very different library landscape as well as a Christchurch city landscape. Overnight, our library was dismantled, the shelving was removed, the books were stacked up on the floor in thigh-high piles of a very unique form of Dewey Decimal. And the council moved in. Christchurch City Council, we share the library with them. It's their building, so they took it as an emergency response centre. And at its peak last year, there were 2 teams of 70-plus people working, 2 shifts of 70-plus people working about sort of 18 hours a day. We set up a mini library in the 2 classrooms attached to the library. We managed to take out every bit of young adult fiction because that had been stuck on the wall, so it couldn't be taken off. And we moved that into one of the classrooms, so that was awesome. It was not so good for non-fiction. As a joint use library, we're used to drawing on the amazing collection of Christchurch City Libraries Network. And we had our piles on the floor. We'd lost around 100 students, but we still had 900. And at the time, the national curriculum hadn't made any allowances for the earthquakes in Christchurch. 2 weeks after we came back, I had the deputy principal, science teacher, start his astronomy topic. He had 23 students, and I could find 14 books for his topic. They came into the library. These kids supported learning, a mix of behavioural and learning problems. It was very frustrating. These kids were pretty disengaged. The phones were out, they were texting, they were Facebooking, and we were losing them. Now, this teacher had also been at ULearn, and he hadn't been to the Apple Smackdown session that I'd been to, but he had heard me raving about it. Apple Smackdown is a tiny room with Apple freaks in there, and every 2 minutes a different person stands up and throws an Apple suggestion, an app, a program, a way of using Apple in education, and I'd been absolutely overwhelmed by it. I had a quick word to the teacher in the science lesson, said, let's see if we can app for that. It was an absolute revelation. With the class setup that we had enough for 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 devices with iPods, iPhones, iPad, and the teacher and I both had a smartphone. We encouraged the kids to look for apps on the App Store and the Play Store. We bought a few ourselves, and this lesson that we were losing it in became a parallel information literacy session. All of a sudden, we were comparing and contrasting a pay resource and a free resource. The kids were putting keywords into the App Store that was a bit like using an index. When they were looking at the app descriptions, that was a bit like a contents page. And all of a sudden we had this engagement, and they were transferring that from the apps back to the books. We wouldn't have believed it if it hadn't happened to us, especially with these kids. I was really convinced at that stage that mobile devices had enormous untapped potential in the school library, but not all teachers were keen. A lot of them were still banning them, they were confiscating them. It was still an absolute no-go. I decided to start showing subtle ways that the cell phone could be used in class. So whenever I did a lesson using a database, it'd be, right, get your phone out, open up your contacts, put your library card number in under library. Kids would come and ask me, what lesson have I got next, miss? I'd say, look, let's take a photo of your timetable. So I'd print it out for them, they'd take a photo there. I found some really awesome apps for mind mapping, for note-taking, just subtly putting it in there without any pressure on the teachers. Around the time, we had a lovely sized donation from Lake Tuggeranong College in Canberra. We've got a Kiwi Christchurch Riccarton connection with the school librarian and myself, and she organised a sausage sizzle and an Easter egg hunt for us post-earthquake. She donated enough money for an iPad. Well, it was a sizable amount of money that I decided was enough for an iPad. So I'd suggested to the management team that as the library was occupied and we were more affected than anywhere else in the school with the earthquake, that we should get the money. So that worked. We bought an iPad, and the library sandpit idea evolved, where I wanted the kids to be able to come into the library and play with the technology. Our school was borders on a decile 9 to about a decile 1-2, so we've got a huge cross-section of kids that often will not get the chance to play with their technology. So the kids would come in, they would take the phone, they would take the iPad, and they would play with it. We encouraged them to, and we showed them respect and trust like we expected from them. The rule for whatever you wanted to download was, if your grandma or your principal was sitting next to you, would you still be doing the same thing? And we haven't really had any problems. That whole lifelong learning message is, these are the things you have to think about when you leave school. Is it situationally appropriate? Am I allowed to do this now? And it was great learning for life. I use it for noise control. I've got an app called Too Noisy. I stick it on a desk at lunchtime and say, how happy's the face, guys? And if it's a black screen with the hands and the ears, I don't really need to say too much. They know that they're a bit too noisy. We established SMUG, which is the Smartphone Users Group. It was an email service, an email group initially, and then on a teacher-only day, I invited Christchurch City Library staff from Riccarton, and we had teacher trainees and teachers and the principal, and we had a 2-hour mini Apple Smackdown at Riccarton High School, where we shared, everyone came with apps, shared them, talked about them, and we did a mix of personal and professional apps. October last year, I went to ULearn, kindly supported by Aoraki LIANZA. It was there that I heard about the e-fellowship. I came back, I presented a proposal which was this topic exactly, and I was successful. Over my e-fellowship year, I have never looked at a cell phone screen so much. My thumb is constantly tapping on my now second iPhone, and my kids even tell me, "Get off the phone, Mum." At work, our library buzzes all day. It's a joint use community school library. Not all our kids are in the library for books, but nor are our community library customers either. We are connecting with what they're doing in their free time. We've got no signs that say what they can or can't do, because the community don't have that either. We consciously make an effort to engage with the kids. We'll sit with them, we'll chat, we'll ask them what they're doing without seeming too nosy, and we'll ask them what sort of games they're playing, what apps are they playing, to get an idea of what's in at the moment. And by building these relationships, we're getting to know them before they need us when they come in with class. It's working really, really well. Now, as librarians in all our different sectors, we know our collections better than any search engine. The library's resources, though, they don't market themselves. Many of our resources and treasures are hidden in our websites that really we know they're there, and it makes it very easy for a student to default to Google because they're too lazy to use a search engine. I miss those photos of our gorgeous kids. I'm just going to go back a little tiny bit to show you. So there's lunchtime, class time, lunchtime, English. Not very good at keeping up with these slides. The librarian's role, I see, as a school librarian, is diagnostic, connecting with the best resources for my customer at the time, with the best outcome being a happy student who will come back and they've learnt something at the same time. We all know what a complete waste of time Google can be without the right attack. There's a gorgeous quote from Clay Shirky that says, "There's no such thing as information overload, only filter failure." Earlier this year, I heard a TED talk that talked about if you thought about the information you consumed like the food you consume, what would you do differently? And it really got me thinking about the way in which we deliver information to our kids, but then the follow-up support. I select and I prepare print-based resources, displays, team teach, tag websites, give handouts, but once they leave the library, that information is only in their head and often not. So this year, last month actually, I launched Library Paula as a Facebook page, supported by the gorgeous eFellows. Now, the idea with this is to connect with the kids, and it's a way of me sharing with them things that I think they need to know about the current teaching and learning that's going on in school. So after a lesson, I will share on the Facebook page the steps, the links, the ideas, things that I think will support them with their research that's going on at the moment. They can post a question and in the comment field, and I'll get back to them. Most of the kids have got zero Facebook on their phone, so it's free. It just seems like an absolute no-brainer to not tap into this. Our teenagers have never really known a world without a mobile phone, without Facebook, and for many of them, Wi-Fi. These are my kids at my school. Delivering them a library information feed keeps us and the school library in their world. Holding on to the service models of the past and not embracing the new will not engage the next generation of library users. In Riccarton High School's library, we've found that by experimenting and trying and playing with new ways of promoting our resources, and they're not all effective, but just by experimenting, that we're linking with more of our students than we ever have before. I read last week that 85% of information transfer is informal. In the first 10 days of the Library Paula page going live, I had 91 users and just over 2,400 hits. There's no way, as a school librarian, I could connect with that many kids normally. My e-fellowship year has not finished yet. I've got about another month to go. This is my warm-up practice before I have to present at ULearn in 2 weeks to a bunch of teachers. So thank you for being a library audience. That's very comforting. My conclusions to date about the action research I've been doing is that mobile devices do create engagement with library resources for non-traditional library users when facilitated by a librarian. That using apps to support student learning is beneficial when it's part of a blended learning environment. And that play is an incredibly powerful learning tool for adults and children. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. That was fantastic. Just amazing to see how you can turn a far from ideal situation into a really positive one, whether it's the Latham in your class that's a bit of a class clown and not paying attention, or an earthquake that, disturbs everything in your normal daily work and can become a really positive experience. We have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have something they'd like to ask Paula? Over here? Okay, we'll just get a microphone to you.
Hi, Paula. Guy Field from Christchurch City Libraries. I'm interested in the way that you've sort of worked with Facebook. I know a lot of schools have policies around Facebook. You've obviously decided to take the side door approach to that. Where do you see the next step, both at your school and in terms of the wider education community, in terms of, I guess, legitimising Facebook and schools becoming more comfortable with Facebook?
Our school hasn't legitimised Facebook. I've done it illegally. I've gone through my page. We still ban Facebook. So, I'm waiting for the repercussions of that. But I hope the stats are going to outweigh, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So I think there's big change coming. There's a digital citizenship program being launched at ULearn that will give schools ideas about consistent ways to approach social media and the online environment. And there's a package going to be coming out of 10 module unit for different stages throughout the education years. I think that's going to go a long way to making people feel comfortable that they can embrace this, because they're giving the I's are being dotted and T's are being crossed. So also, just positive experiences are going to outweigh those negatives. I remember Stephen Abrams at conference in 2006 saying that electricity used to be banned in public buildings because it was dangerous. How far along we've moved. So I think that needs to be embraced too, the positives of it. And, we teach our kids to walk to school safely. We teach them stranger danger. We have to start teaching that stuff, and then we can let them go and walk the bridge.
Any other questions? We do have one in the front here. We'll just get you a microphone.
Thanks. I'm interested, you said that every kid's got a phone stuck to his ear, but what sort of penetration of smartphones that allows kids to do the sorts of things you've been talking about is there, just particularly when you said that your decile range is across the board?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Year 9 orientation program, we have 2 sessions in social studies and English for library orientation. This year I did a digital citizenship and social studies, so anecdotally surveyed each class. Every class had a maximum of 2 students without a cell phone, and between a third and a half of those kids had smartphones. So Android have brought the price down so much with your entry level that you can do a lot of this stuff with entry level. A lot of our low decile kids have those phones they'll have maybe one, and there might be one between a few kids, and they're bringing them along. That's something that's being said at school. The kids don't have them, but when we surveyed them, because in order to run a program, I need to know what they're working with. I'm not going to focus on lots of what ifs if it's not the reality. And 2 was the maximum of a class size between 27 and 31 that didn't have a cell phone. And over this year, more and more, my son's in year 9 at Riccarton, and in his class now, half those kids have iPhones. They didn't have them when they started, or smartphones. So yeah, huge number coming on. And that's where it's great having a couple of devices in the library too, because we can just let the kids go for them with those, even if it's 1 to 2. A lot of junior work is done in groups with inquiry thinking, so you don't need a device per person. It's in a group, so you have got the access to it to experience it.